Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to ensure that everyone's on the webinar. I can see there's quite a few of you already, but we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll begin. Great, so I think we're ready to begin. So, hi everyone, my name is Kirsty and I work for the Waste Prevention team at the North London Waste Authority. And we often receive lots of questions from our residents on the different types of plastics and what they are, and what those triangular symbols with the numbers printed in the middle, what that symbol means, and what can and can't be recycled plastic-wise. So we thought it'd be great to produce this webinar and help answer some of those questions. We've actually already delivered this webinar once before and it was really popular, so we definitely wanted to do it again. And I'll just make a few announcements regarding some technical bits and bobs. So we've got a chat function on the top right hand side. Do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. There's also an option to add subtitles to your screen if you would find this helpful. Please note we've had a couple of complaints that it's not 100% accurate. It's not, I'm afraid. I think it's like American English and sometimes it doesn't record exactly what you say. But if you would find this helpful, please do feel free to add that, and you can do that by selecting the CC symbol on the slide, and that should be found at the bottom right hand corner of your page. And as I mentioned, we will have a question and answer section, and you can access the Q&A part of this webinar on the top right hand corner of your screen. Do feel free to write your questions and suggestions about the presentation, and we will try and answer those for you. We will do a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. But if we do run out of time, we do provide our email address as well in case we can't answer your question for whatever reason, we need more information, or we'll just get back to you on that. And we do have a couple of helpers behind the scenes, so thank you to my lovely colleagues. They might help answer some of your questions as we go along as well. But overall, we will try and do a good question and answer session at the end. And just before we start, for people who don't know who we are, the North London Waste Authority, also known as NLWA, is a statutory waste disposal authority for the 7 North London boroughs, as you can see on the map on the right. And the key priorities for NLWA is to arrange for the recycling and treatment for most of these boroughs, managing the reuse from recycling centres, and promoting waste minimisation and recycling. And so the team that I work for is the Waste Prevention team, and our key priorities are to educate residents living and working in the North London area on reuse, reduction of waste, recycling, and we do this through a number of ways, such as presentations like this one, which we'd normally deliver in person, engaging with businesses, holding stalls, upcycling workshops, and a schools education programme, just to name a few of the things that we do. So many of you might have, who've on the webinar today, you might have attended some of our outreach activities, food stalls, things like that. And we do have regular face-to-face conversations with our residents, and obviously we can't do that at the moment, hence delivering this presentation today. So we hope you find it helpful. And this is what we're going to cover today. My lovely colleague Val will be taking over and talking you through the journey of plastics. We will also hear from, I will also give a little bit of information about some of the comms side of things, and a couple of examples of plastics campaigns that we've run at NLWA on how to create awareness around reducing, reusing and recycling plastic. So over to you, Val.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kirsty. So thank you all for registering and coming over today to learn more and chat about plastics. Plastic is one of our greatest inventions, but unfortunately today it's also one of our greatest challenges. I believe it was Tom Zaki from Loop who quoted that actually. In this webinar, I will explain the different types of plastics, talk about its problems, what is happening to fix the problem, and what we can all do to help. So let's start with some background and statistics about plastics. Plastic was first invented in the 1800s by an English guy called Alexander Parkes, but it was made from plant fibers. Then in the early 1900s, the first plastic made from crude oil was created, and that is what plastic is made from today. We use 300 million tons of plastics per year, and half of this is used only once and chucked away. On average, the UK household throws away 40 kilos of plastic per year, enough to manufacture 3 recycling bins. This is just a third shy of my weight in plastics. We recycle only 30% of plastics in the UK, and our target is to reach 75% by 2030. A great challenge. Unfortunately, plastic does not decompose. It will just break down into smaller and smaller pieces until it becomes microscopic. These microplastics will reach rivers, the ocean, enter the food chain. It is in our tap water and even inside of our body cells. So before we chat about our common plastics, I would like just to clarify that any material can potentially be recycled. The question is how difficult and how much it will cost to recycle this. Will the recycled material have any value at the end of the process? Will there be a market for this material? Let's just make a comparison here. Aluminium, for example, can be recycled indefinitely. A can of aluminium will be turned into another can and so on. So it is cheaper to reuse these cans that we already have than it is to mine virgin aluminium. Therefore, aluminium is currently considered a recyclable material. Plastic, on the other hand, is super cheap to produce from crude oil. It is in most things we use. It has a lot of demand for more. And certain plastics, such as polystyrene, the process to recycle these materials is just too expensive to be economically and environmentally viable. And that's why plastic is a current problem. Going back to our common plastics, the plastic used in our shopping bags, for example, here in the middle, is most of the time made from LDPE, one of the 7 types of plastics, which we will see again a bit later. It's very poor in quality and has very little value, hence why some boroughs will not recycle them. The plastic used on water bottles, here on the left, is most of the time made from PET. And PET is the most recycled plastic that there is at the moment because it is high in quality and it is clear in color. Normally, the darker it is the plastic, the less value it will have because you can only turn that color into a darker color. Just to show this in numbers, Europe is recycling 51% of clear PET bottles and only 14% of colored PET bottles. The ones with a hint of color, you will see in a bit. It's a bit like this one, but this is probably HDPE. So looking again at this picture here, the top right, these bottles are most likely made of HDPE or PP, which are a harder type of plastic. A lot of products are made of these plastics, but they are not as desirable as PET. Europe recycles only 19% of HDPE bottles. We will see all these plastics again a few slides down when we will talk about plastic symbols and those numbers we see on packaging. and it will all be a bit clearer, I promise. Plastic is used in so many areas of our lives, from the time we wake up using our toothpaste, toothbrush, shampoo, shower curtain, to the time we set our alarms on our plastic clock, or mobile phone, or even the sheets for our bedding that we sleep on, or our pajamas, is often a mixture of cotton and polyester. We are surrounded of this stuff, and most of the time we don't even realize it. Plastic is very important for our lives, and currently we just can't live without it, especially considering the health sector. And here are some things and products that you would not necessarily associate with plastics. Cigarette butts, false teeth, swimming pools and surfboards, airplane and cars. The exterior of my smart car, for example, is also actually made of plastic. Clothing, made from nylon or polyester. Just a note here, plastic microfibers are washed away in every washing machine cycle. This will eventually reach the ocean and the food chain. Now, a surprising one that I haven't heard before is the lining of the socket for a hip replacement. It's also made of plastic, PET. You can see here the wall and ceiling insulation. That fluffy and itchy material is made of fiber plastic. Chewing gum. Now, have a look at what I found online. This is a 5,000-year-old chewing gum. Of course, this is not made of crude oil, as our current chewing gum is. It is actually made of a birch tree resin, but someone was definitely chewing on it 5,000 years ago, as they found Neolithic teeth marks on it. I just thought it was a fun thing to share with you guys. Our current chewing gum, shown here, made of plastic, will most likely take 500 years to break down. So carry on, we have dental floss, which is made of plastic, disposable masks, microbead toothpaste and scrubs. You almost can see the beads in here on the picture. Now, luckily, microbeads are banned in the UK since 2018, apart from a few products. Otherwise, tens of thousands of microbeads would be washed away for every time someone uses these products. Around 10% of the toothpaste would contain microbeads. Teflon, the great non-stick pots and pans, is basically a plastic lining. Nail polish, paints, plastic is just everywhere. Now that we are aware of the common and unusual plastics in our lives, shall we have a look at what happens to your recyclable plastic beyond your bin after you present it for collection? So it will be first be sent to one of these transfer stations if you live in North London, and from there it will go to a MRF. And a MRF is a material recycling facility. There, all your recycling material and plastics will be placed onto a conveyor belt running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where plastics will be separated by an optical sensor based on the density and color, seen here on the top middle of the slide. Then, these sorted plastics will be packed into bales. It's a very cool place to visit if you ever have the chance. These bales will then be sent to a processing company here on the left, where the plastics will be shredded, washed, melted, mixed with additives, added virgin plastic to it, so to turn into the same or a different type of plastic, which we will see on the next slide. The end result of this process is pellets. These pellets, they look like plastic beads, will be sent to manufacturers here on the right to produce more bottles and plastic products. So, as promised, to go a bit deeper regarding the types of plastics available to us, I will now explain the symbols or PICs, plastic identification codes. Most of consumers will get confused with those recycling symbols and numbers on the products and containers they buy. These triangular symbols became synonymous of recycling, recyclable, or recycled materials, but unfortunately, they are only stating the type of plastics they are. They do not mean the product was ever recycled, nor that it will ever be. So, the symbols or codes are a mouthful, but here they are. Pick 1, PT, polyethylene terephthalate. As I mentioned earlier, it is what water bottles are made from. It is high in value and quality, and typically clear in color, and loads of stuff is made from it. And here's what I promised, that you can see the tinted PET. It is the most recycled plastic in the world, and it could have around 25% of recycled plastic incorporated into the mixture. Pick 2, HDPE, or high density polyethylene. It is harder than PET, hence high density in the name. It is what milk bottles are made from. The opaque, white and clearish in transparency color. It is also very high quality stuff, so it is the second most recycled plastic in the world. A curiosity here is that most milk bottles will be made from virgin plastic, and that opaque whitish color you can see here, even though they are not milk bottles, you can see that they're kind of transparent. So that color is the actual color of the virgin HDPE plastic. Saying that, of course, you can add some color to it, as you can see here. Pick 3, PVC, or polyvinyl chloride. It is used mainly for construction, as it is toxic both to the environment and human health, from production to use to disposal. It is nicknamed poison plastic, but it is used everywhere. Pick 4, LDPE, or low density polyethylene. It is a very flexible plastic, hence low density in the name. It is the plastic used for disposable bags and squeezable tubes. It is less desirable and not widely recycled. Pick 5, it's PP, or polypropylene. It is a heat and chemical resistant plastic that will not crack when bent. Popular packaging for yogurt and butter. It is also used for clothing, toys, straws, crisp packaging. A lot of the lids from drinks as well is made of PP. It can be recycled, but it is also not very desirable. Pick 6, PS, or polystyrene. It is an extreme lightweight plastic that can be turned into a white foam-like material, and it is great for insulation. It is the white light stuff that comes inside the TV box you bought, not currently recycled. And finally, pick 7. Now, pick 7 is any other plastic or mixture of plastics. It is one of the most difficult to recycle plastics due to its unknown mixture, and there are numerous products made from this plastic. Well, now that you all know your plastics, and we know that plastic is everywhere and we can't avoid buying some of it, here are some reasons to why we should at least recycle it. If we recycle plastic, we will have less greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere when compared using virgin plastic extracted from crude oil. It provides a sustainable source of raw materials to the industry and avoids the use of our earth oil stock. If we need plastic and plastic is made from oil and oil is a finite resource, so it just makes sense to reuse the stuff. It is also cheaper than landfill, mainly PET and HDPE, as I mentioned. The other types can be too expensive to recycle depending on the current market. Recycling will also free up space in landfill sites. In the UK, we do struggle to find space for landfill. It consumes less energy than producing new virgin plastics. It adds the right value and behavior supporting the circular economy. And if we recycle, we will have less plastics reaching the oceans and the food chain. Scientists are predicting that by 2050, we will have more plastics than fish in the oceans. A very sad reality. Have a look at this photo. This is the rubbish island found in the Pacific Ocean between the coast of California and Hawaii. It is half of the size of America, mostly isn't as obvious and visible as this photo. It's more like a plastic soup made of microplastics, which is a harder problem to fix actually. If it was as visible as this, it would be much easier to clean up. And this is just half of the problem because 50% of plastics will actually sink to the bottom of the ocean, especially PET, what water bottles are made from, and polyester fibers, what you find in textiles. There are 4 more vortexes gathering plastics around the globe. The one I just showed you is in the middle here. So clearly, and this is formed by the ocean currents. Clearly, this is a massive problem to be paid attention to. Some of the bigger pieces of plastics found in these vortexes had dates printed on them, and they found that some were dated from the 1970s. Now, just imagine how old are the microplastics that had more time to break down. In here, you can see a seahorse that will grab any floating debris moving with the current so they can use as their way of transport. But animals and the fish we eat are eating plastics, thinking it is food. I found a shocking video on Twitter, here on the right, which we will share on the comment box, but we chose not to show during the webinar as it may be upsetting for some viewers. It shows a fisherman opening the stomach of a fish, and it was completely full and hard with plastics. So yeah, you can actually see here on the picture him holding the stomach. Shocking. This plastic that animals are eating, it will not go through the digestive system, and their stomach will literally run out of space for the actual food, and ultimately they will die starved with a stomach full of plastics. Now, the fish that will not die and will end up onto our plates to be eaten, they will have micro and nanoplastics inside their body and cells. These micro and nanoplastics reaching our tap water and food have absorbed along the way what scientists call POPs, persistent organic pollutants. They are toxic chemicals that are harmful to humans and the environment. These chemicals will then be absorbed by our bodies, and there are studies saying that they can interfere with our hormones and immune system. So, what can be done? There is a lot of pressure for new policies and research, and the European Union, central government, and the Mayor of London are setting targets, such as by 2023, packaging will have clearer labels as to whether it can or cannot be recycled. Waste management companies, such as Viridor, are researching on ways to recycle that currently is not easy to, of materials that are not easy to recycle. They also pressure the government to impose manufacturers to produce only recyclable packaging, for example. And at the end, it is on their interest, after all, as they sell these recycled materials. There is also a lot of pressure at the main global plastic producers, such as Nestle, PepsiCo, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola. They must allocate some of their revenue to research and recycling. We have the Plastic Pact, a global partnership with businesses, government and NGOs, setting targets and banning plastics. I believe UK is the first to start with the pact. We are seeing the comeback of reusable packaging. There are some policies being created to incentive repairing goods businesses. So you can fix your blender, for example, like in the old times, taken to a corner workshop. We'll see this already in Scandinavia. Also, there are policies where manufacturers will guarantee a longer lifespan of their products. There is research in chemical recycling, really early days, transforming plastic back into oil. There is research on bacteria and fungi which can decompose plastics, plans for cleanups of the ocean. There is an NGO in Netherlands working on this. You can also talk to your local councillor and MP, as they can influence central government into creating better policies. And whilst all this is brewing, we can act too. We can be a conscious consumer by reducing the use and purchase of plastics such as PVC and polystyrene, which are currently not being recycled. Avoid single-use plastics, microbeads products, plastic bags, polyester, lycra and nylon clothing. And we can also try to dispose of our recycling material correctly. This is a big help. But we can also try to buy long-lasting and maybe second-hand clothing, choose glass, aluminium and paper against plastics, refill your bottle instead of buying your water bottles, and so on. Let's try and keep and reuse what we already have. Maybe give a new life to it. And if I might finish saying, let's think twice before buying what we don't need, especially plastics. Recycling is a massive help, and it is necessary. But before getting to that, let's avoid getting plastic in the first place. Well, this is all for me, guys. Thank you all. I hope it was informative and helpful. I will now hand back over to my colleague, Kirsty, who will be talking about communications regarding plastics. Back to you, Kirsty.
Great, thank you so much, Val. That was so informative. Even though I've heard it so many times, I always learn something new, and I'm always really impressed by your pronunciation of those plastic terms, which I wouldn't even begin to try and pronounce. So yeah, I'm just going to talk through a little bit about what we've done at NLWA to help reduce plastic and promote the reuse of materials, particularly bottles and water. So if you don't mind just popping on to the next slide, Val. So some of the things that we do, as we've mentioned, is delivering events that might focus on plastics. We post a lot on our social media channels, particularly at the moment. We have a great communications team that we work really closely with who do some great campaigns and projects and talk about plastic quite a lot. And when we are delivering some bigger campaigns, we might even do large posters like the one on the right. That's a JC2Co bus stop poster, I think. And if we can, we'll try and get people to, we'll try and get it into the media, so your local newspapers and things like that, if it's a particularly interesting campaign that we can get more people to grab eyes on, really. So yeah, that's just some of the things we do. And then I think on the next slide, we've got an example of a campaign that we've run called the Refill campaign, which, as I mentioned, encourages the use of reusable bottles. We provide these metal bottles to help people hopefully refill them a little bit more and avoid plastic. And I think you can save up to £100 a year by not using plastic bottles, and I think it's a lot higher than that actually. And so with this campaign, as I mentioned, we gave people these metal bottles. We actually asked them if they didn't mind getting involved in our social media and taking photos. And as part of that campaign, we reached, sorry, next slide please, Val. We managed to get coverage in regional and national publications and reached up to 6.6 million people, which will have been helped by all of the promotion on social media and things like that. So that's just one example of how we've delivered a campaign that has a plastics focus. But yeah, so I think we're nearly at the end of our right on time. It's 3 o'clock, so we've got about 15 minutes left to go through some questions. So that's our email address there if you did want to get in touch with us for any reason, and I really hope that you will follow us on social media. So I'm really surprised we actually don't have as many questions as we normally do, so do get those in and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So I'll start at the top. I did provide the link actually to our website, which on it you can check out this video from YouTube, which is about BIFA, and it looks at plastics recycling. It's super informative and really interesting, so do check that out. And also, if you are from one of the North London boroughs, there's links to all of your borough recycling pages on there as well. So Zoe asked, and I think my colleagues answered the question about, she asked about the plastic numbers that are recycled in Haringey. Generally, we wouldn't normally talk about those different types of plastics with the triangles and the symbols, because it can lead to a lot of confusion. We would just list the types of bottles and different types of plastics that can be recycled, you know, the fruit trays and everything like that, because it can get quite confusing. I know it confuses me, and I've worked in the industry for a few years now, so generally we would never do that. It's just because we wanted to go into much more detail on this webinar that we're doing that. And you'll see on all of the borough web pages about recycling, they'll never list the triangle types of numbers of plastics, the PICs either. So that's just to try and make it as easy as possible for everyone.
If you'd like, I can add to it as well.
Yeah, please do, Val. Try and share your screen. There you go.
So I think, yes, don't pay attention to the number if you're considering, if you're thinking of putting this in your recycling bin. And the reason why is, it's just as I explained at the beginning of the webinar, it will vary depending of the market, the current market, if that material will be recycled or not. Sometimes plastic bags are recycled, sometimes they're not, and this will depend on the market and as well as the contract that your borough has with the contract company. So pay attention to, as Kirsty said, to the website of your council, your borough, and that will explain to you which plastic you should be recycling. It's just for you to understand the purpose of talking about the numbers is that we genuinely have a lot of questions about this triangular symbols, and we thought, let's just explain what they are and so people know. But again, pay attention to what your borough is saying.
Exactly. Thank you, Val. And someone also mentioned one of the links wasn't working, so apologies for that. And then I think, again, Miriam's been quick and answered this one. So can we recycle tops of bottles? And if so, should they be removed from putting them in the bin? This is one of Val's favourite answers and questions. Yes. She's got a great answer to it. So I'm going to hand over to Val on this one.
That's fine. In fact, I even got a little bit of a more controversy this week as I was looking at LinkedIn, a post. But I will start by saying, yes, please separate the leads. And the main reason is a lot of the times that lead, the top bottle, I don't have one to explain, but usually it's a different type of plastic. OK, but more than that, it's also the color of plastic. As I mentioned, the darker is the color, the less value it will have, so it will be sold separately. And it tends to be that the bottle is transparent and the lid is colored. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is if you leave the lid on, basically the truck that collects your recycling waste will be transporting that bottle full of air. And no matter how much pressure the inside of the truck have to compress the waste, it doesn't get compressed. It doesn't explode inside. It basically transports air, which, you know, contributes to CO2 emissions and climate change. There was a controversy because there are ways of processing plastic which is different than separating before it's being shredded. There's a way as well, as I mentioned, that some plastics will sink, the other one will float. Sometimes what they do is that if the plastics are too mixed, there's too much contamination, so they shred the whole thing and they put it on water, and whatever floats is a type of plastic, whatever sinks is another type of plastic. So this is a different way of processing, which then that's why some boroughs will say keep the lids on, because probably they're using that processing. So again, follow your borough. It will vary. It's not a rule, but I would prefer if you separate it because the fact of transporting air.
Exactly. So yeah, the short answer is no, you don't have to, but if you do, that's also great because of all the reasons that Val's just mentioned. So we've actually got loads of questions rushing in, so we'll try and get through those. And I know my colleagues are also helping to answer those. So I'm going to try not to answer the ones that have already been answered, just so we can get through as many as we can. How do we visit a recycling and sorting plant? Thanks very much for the presentation. You're welcome. So we do, well, not we, BIFA do tend to do several visits, which we can arrange on your behalf. Unfortunately, they aren't running at the moment, and there's only a few, a very small handful that we are able to allocate to our residents anyway. So unfortunately, you'll have to get back in touch with us, I'd say, in a couple of months, and we might know more on that one. So sorry, I can't answer your question on that one. So someone's asked, what happens to all the non-recyclable plastic after sorting? Unfortunately, if it's not recyclable at the MRF, it will have to go as waste, in short, to answer your question. So I'd like to know where the plastic bales go to after the recycling centre. Oh, that's a great question. It really depends. Once they're all sorted, they get sold. So do you want to maybe touch on a little bit more on that?
Basically, I don't know if the person that asked the question saw my slide on the processing company. I don't know if we can still see the slides on. I might be able to quickly show the person. But basically, if it's baled, it will be sold to a processing company, which will be then process that material. As I said, sometimes it's shredded and then separated by floating on water. Sometimes it's just separated by color or type of plastics, and then it's melted, and then that it will transform into pellets, as I mentioned earlier, and then these pellets will be sold to factories. These pellets are then clean, completely separate in color and types of plastics already ready to be used, and that's what happens.
Great, thank you, Val. Just going to read some more of these questions. So I think Miriam's answering one of those questions. So, are plastics that aren't easily recycled ever burn as an energy recovery method? So if they go to the sorting facility and if there are options to recycle them, no, that would be the least preferred method, just in short, to answer your question. And Anne has asked, I'm unsure about a plastic item being recycled. Should I put it in the recycling bin or the black general rubbish bin? It depends what that item is. If you give us an example, we might be able to help answer your question, but do check out our A to Z on the website because you might find it there. But generally, if you're not sure and you're really in doubt, leave it out is what we would say. As cringy as that sounds, yeah, just maybe leave it, because we've got actually in 2 weeks time we've got another webinar on contamination, which is the kind of negative impacts about putting the wrong things in the recycling and what happens to it. So do check out that webinar in a couple of weeks time. Again, it'll be on a Thursday at the same time, and it's actually up now on Eventbrite, ready to register for that one. So I think you might find that one useful, Anne. And then we have another question about where the materials end up and how the materials end up in the oceans from the MRFs. First of all, that's a very interesting question and also a controversial one. The materials don't necessarily end up in the ocean from the mirth. I think there are lots of ways that plastics can end up in the ocean, and that could be as simple as littering something on the floor. That plastic might go into the drains, in the street, which is obviously water underneath, which can eventually end up in the ocean. There's obviously places that actually dump plastic in the ocean, littering by the beach, all kinds of things. So yeah, I probably can't give you an exact answer to that one. So I hope it's helpful. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Val.
The only thing I was going to add is that a MRF will never waste any recycling material, because they use something. It's worth something. It's a commodity, it has their own stock market, it's valuable. So no, this is usually, as Kirsty said, it happens via not putting in the right place for recycling and disposing incorrectly.
Great, thank you, Val. Just check out more of our questions. So Mikey has said, don't forget to promote the A to Z widget on the NLWA website. That's an excellent way to learn and what you can and can't be recycled. Thank you. Definitely. And I can see that my colleagues have been posting it multiple times. So do check that out if you're ever unsure. And thank you for that suggestion. And then we've got another question. So how much of the plastic that we put in the one bin for everything actually gets recycled? So assume when you say one bin for everything, that's like obviously the mixed recycling, how much actually gets recycled? Oh, that again, very difficult question. I probably can't give you an exact answer on the spot for the North London boroughs. And also it depends, it changes all the time. It's to do with the amount of waste, the amount of item materials that are contaminating and have to be taken out. So if people put lots of the wrong things in, it can lead to, and we'll talk about this in so much more detail in a couple of weeks' time, but it can lead to the whole load having to go as waste. So that's a massive issue. If lots of people recycle the wrong things, and we're talking lots of food waste, lots of nappies, lots of really bad things, not maybe your odd bit of plastic that can't be recycled, that can mean that it goes as waste. So we've got a question, I think, about tap water. Tips on how you argue against common conception that tap water is bad. So many people won't drink anything that comes from out of a bottle, doesn't come out of a bottle, excuse me. Yeah, I drink tap water all the time. One thing I tend to say to residents if they ask and they say they obviously drink bottled water for you know, the fact that it's cleaner and everything, is that you can use a filter. I've got a filter in my fridge, a water filter. They're not super expensive, and that's one way that if you are a bottled water drinker and you're very a massive advocate for that, then give it a try. It does make the water taste nicer. I generally don't mind the taste of tap water, but you know, there are lots of people that do. So I'll see if we've got any more questions. We've got a couple more minutes left, and then that's the end of today's webinar. See if we've got any new questions. Not at the moment. Sarah has asked, when will chocolate be in recyclable and sustainable packaging? Oh, great question, Zoe. I don't know is the straight answer. Obviously, that's up to the manufacturers to design better packaging that can be recycled, and that is part of, you know, a much larger, hopefully, government policies required to encourage encourage manufacturers to try and use more recyclable products. And I believe we've got multiple things on our website sort of answering those. We've got examples of responses to government consultations about things like this. So I might be able to ask one of my colleagues to give you a link, and that might be more helpful. And then we've got 1 more minute left. And I think on that note, I'll just have to say a massive thank you to Val for delivering today's presentation. It was great and I learned so much, and I hope everyone else did. Thank you all for your questions and for attending. We hope you found it really useful. And there are loads of links on the thread if you have a look through. Hopefully some of those will answer your questions. And again, do you mind just popping up our email address, Val, just in case there's anything we haven't answered, and if anyone has any more questions, they can get in touch.
Just give me a second. I'm gonna jump down to.
Thank you.
That should be it now. Thank you all as well, and please send emails if you have any more questions that pop up into your head after the webinar, and we will try to answer as many as possible.
Great, thanks so much everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye.